Well, guys, welcome back to Decoding Babylon. I'm JT, my partner Bryan over here, and we have a special guest. And I'm sure if you're with Understanding Conspiracies YouTube channel and you're a subscriber, you know the guest is Paul, and we're totally honored to have you on here, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's
Oh,
gonna
of
be fun.
course.
It's gonna be fun.
Of course, it's funny. I was saying before that, like, as Brian and I made Ancient Angels, a show that's, I mean, a movie that's about dedicated about the, like, kind of our history that's been untold about angels, Nephilim, demons. Like, inevitably, somebody was saying, like, you need to hook up with this guy Paul from Understanding Conspiracy, because he's got this very interesting take about clowns and Nephilim. And it's, at first, when I think I saw your videos popping up, because obviously that's kind of stuff I watch on YouTube. The algorithm says you're going to like this guy's videos. The idea that clowns and Nephilim could be could be some kind of connection. It sounded at first provocative to me until I watched one of your videos, and I was like, wait a minute, actually, this is not just some kind of outlandish take. It actually makes perfect sense. And so, Paul, the obvious question is, like, how did you make this connection? Because I haven't seen many other people talking about this.
Yeah, it is a weird one. I know what it sounds like. I really do know what it sounds like when you first hear the theory. Trust me. Like, as I explained before it crashed, I didn't think I'd end up talking about these type of things. It's just where my research led me, and it's just one of those snowballing connections that kept going one thing after another. I'll correct the record now. Even though the theory is called the Nephilim look like clowns, technically the truth is clowns are modeled after Nephilim. So there's a difference there. My wife is always telling me I'm a fraud. You need to change the title. You're lying to people, and I'm like, I've been doing this for 7 years. I can't change it now. It is what it is. I didn't know it'd end up like this 7 years ago when I started this thing, but here I am, and I'm not changing the name. It seems to work for people, so that's what I'm going to stick with. But yeah, so as I was explaining earlier before it crashed, I'll speed it up again, because if anyone wants to know the full in-depth story to all this and my whole testimony, go to my channel. Plenty of stuff on there explaining how I got to this, but I essentially came out of the New Age perspective, deeply immersed in occult knowledge, let's say, symbolism, practices, a heavy psychedelic user, looking for spiritualism. And in 2014, after a few years of conspiracy research and discovering the truth after the Mayan calendar of 2012 end of the world roped me in, I went down my rabbit hole thing and just, yeah, so like I said, I did my rabbit hole research, and I kept bumping into the Christian angle, the Christian explanation to explain why we have a conspiracy. And I didn't want to go there because I was heavily seeped in the idea that I'm my own God and I can find out all the truth from my own knowledge and save myself in that respect. But I couldn't keep ignoring this whole Christian perspective. It always led back to Jesus. No matter which rabbit hole I went down, it always came full circle back to whatever happened with this guy called Jesus is why you have a conspiracy today. So in 2014, I suppose, is when I was born again. I was kind of at the end of my wick. I had nothing left to give. I was heavily burnt out, seeking the truth through psychedelics and drugs. I was no direction in life. It was the end of my art degree. I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do with my life, or what I even believed. I was a mess. I was just broken down at the end of my ability to just even continue with life. It felt like this is it. What's the point? The world's a mess. It's controlled by evil people. What can we do? We're insignificant. We're tiny. Clearly some evil forces ruling the world. All these type of thoughts are everywhere. And, I got down on my knees basically. And I was like, God, if you're real, help me. That was as simple as that. Just asked for help.
Awesome. That's all. Praise God.
At the end of everything, and with nothing else to give, and all the New Age Gnostic stuff left me with nothing but pain and misery and more questions. I didn't get any answers from that at all in the end. As much as it felt good to think I had all this wisdom and knowledge and power from it, it wasn't actually helping me, practically speaking, in my life. My life was a hell. It was terrible, and I had no job, no money, no direction, nowhere to live. It was kind of just a bad situation. It said, if this is what the occult knowledge gets me, then what's the point? It's kind of what I got to. It's like, this is not good. So I gave my life over to Jesus in about March 2014, just at the end of my degree, doing fine art. And I went down the biblical perspective, and everything was opened up to me from that day. And I started studying the word more, biblical history. I got into things about the Watchers and the Enoch and the Nephilim. And that kind of answered a lot of questions for me, specifically the question of the flood. Why would God allow such a thing? And I think it's something not many Christians who perhaps raised in the institution of churchianity would want to really look at. I think a lot of them consider it blasphemy as well. But I wasn't raised in that world. So for me, it was easier to question narratives that perhaps were more dogma to Christians than they were to me, if you get what I mean. So looking into that, it explained a lot of questions. It was like, okay, so that's why God sent a flood. I get it now. I understand what it was truly like during that time. It was, something needed to be done. It was a mercy. It wasn't cruelty.
Right.
That time was awful. And so from my creative perspective, and having this experience with psychedelics and spirit beings, I understood that, so demons or spirits are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. So I had that, and it's kind of like any interaction I've seen with people, my friends who did these psychedelics, including myself, what they would find were incredibly colorful, crazy looking things in these other places where the demons are supposed to be, in this dry place, disembodied, as Jesus describes it, And it never matched up for me with the images I would always see of Nephilim on most presentations during this time period. People like Rob Skiba at the time were making a lot of presentations talking about the Nephilim, trying to square the history and understand it, and Gary Wayne as well. And it never sat right with me when I kept seeing these images of really tall, hench, huge pectoral, muscled, brown-haired, tanned, barbarian-looking men. It's like that it just didn't sit right with me. It's like, it doesn't make sense, because everywhere I've researched, it's like the Watchers, even outside of the biblical perspective, are something akin to a fiery flying serpent or a feathered serpent or a rainbow serpent, if you want to go to Australia. There were these serpentine class dragon-like gods at some point that mixed with humans and created human dragon offspring. And I was thinking of these, they wouldn't look human. Yes, it was always at the back of my mind. They wouldn't look human, and I'm, like I said, I'm a creative person, so I was always sat with that. And while doing my research into everything occult and everything Christian and trying to make sense of these symbols and signs, 2016 came around, and there was this mass clown sighting happening that was panicking people, and everyone was scared about sightings appearing of people dressed like clowns with knives stood at the edge of forests or on street corners, just menacingly scaring people. And it wasn't so much the story about clowns that got my interest. It was the fact that every single news station across countries, from Europe all the way to America, was telling this same story. Now, if it was just a small isolated event in some particular city in America and the local news station did a story on it, this wouldn't be a thing. But it was all of them. It was everywhere. It was a mass clown sightings all across the country. And I couldn't help but feel, okay, so the media is controlled by, let's just call them the Illuminati, just to summarize it very quickly. I know it's more complicated.
I'm there. I'm with you there.
Yeah, let's just say that. Okay, so if it's heavily controlled by occultists, they don't show you anything on that box in the corner of your room unless they want you to see it. There's a reason why they're showing this. It's a controlled, orchestrated show. Okay, so why are they showing us clowns? What does it mean that there are mass clown sightings everywhere? Well, what's going on? What is going on? Mass clown
world, right?
Yeah. Then again, obviously after that event, the clown world meme did become a huge thing. Everyone was describing reality as like a circus. There's these clowns everywhere going against reality, and it truly became a clown world, like a mimetic thing in the mind of everybody, that the world we live in, the reality we live in, is filled with clowns in a truer sense. The way they act like fools. But this event kickstarted a lot for me. It kind of pieced a lot of pieces together in my mind, because prior to this event, I had been like I said, I'd left my new age psychedelic taking life behind. I was sober by this point after 2014. I quit a lot of things, including cannabis and drinking and drugs, all that kind of stuff just gone, and I still had nicotine, but I've been nicotine free now for a year.
Job,
I stopped last year. I went down to an electric cigarette. So it took a long time to get there, but being born again is literally, I became a new person, and the things that I used to like, I didn't like anymore. Now that was a problem for the demons who were probably loving to live through my body vicariously and experience those things. I don't think they were too happy about my newfound faith and the Holy Spirit kind of kicking them out. So I think I had a lot of attacks during that 2014 to 2016 period, which were demonic in nature, because it was kind of a, well, Paul, if we can't have you, nobody can type of attitude from these entities. And I had first-hand experience of them trying to kill me. I had one moment where I felt like my body went paralyzed, and darkness seeped in from the corners of the room, and I was dying. And it felt like something dark was trying to rip my soul out of me. He was trying to kill me, and I literally just said, Jesus, help me, is all I could do. And it stopped instantly, and I was back in the room.
Awesome.
And things like this kept happening. They kept happening during this initial leaving that world behind and being born again period. And then I was attacked in a dream by a Hat Man entity, which is a very common demonic entity.
Hat Man, yes.
And I didn't know anything about him till after I had the attack and did some research. And it turns out this is everywhere. This is like everyone sees this thing who gets demonically attacked. Like, what is going on, So I had a dream about that, and he looked like a purple pimp of some kind with a cane and multicolored ribbons flying off behind him, like the Morris dancers or the Mummers or something. You know what I mean? He had this weird folky vibe to him. And then I had a random vision of literally looking up. I was in the DMT realm again, which I'd been to a few times before and I knew quite well. So I knew where I was. But this time there was an enormous jester in front of me, like a giant black and white fractaled, big purple grinned, giant glowing purple-eyed jester creature. And it was enormous. And I was like, okay. And then I was back. And I was like, I don't know what that was. These are all things I kind of just placed on a shelf in the back of my mind. What am I supposed to do with this information? I didn't know at the time. It didn't make any sense then. It was just, okay, Paul, I probably shouldn't talk about this because you'll look crazy.
Yeah, be careful who you tell. Be careful who you tell that story to.
Yeah, let's just leave that to one side for now. I'm sure I'll figure that out later, But I remember, during my DMT days, people always said they saw jesters when they did DMT. Jester-like entities would come up to them and start making fun of them and prodding and poking them and telling them to stop taking life too seriously, and just give in to the experience and don't give in to astonishment, and showing them stuff. And I finally saw one. I got it. It's like, there they are. Okay. But I only saw it a couple of years after I quit all this stuff. So it's like they were revealing themselves to me after I quit.
Was it in a
very
dream
strange because
when you saw it?
No, this was just a random flash in the middle
really?
of the day for no reason
because
whatsoever.
the drug stays in your spine. I've heard some of the drug kind of things. They like store and they'll happen.
I've heard plenty of they call them flashbacks. So I put it down to that initially. But I found it strange that in all the years I was doing these things, I never saw anything like that. And then suddenly when I quit, it's like I could see them again. And while I've got the Holy Spirit in me, I felt more protected. Like, sure, I'm looking at this thing, but it can't do anything to me is what it felt like. It was just one of those moments where it's like, okay, again, I didn't know what to do with that. So when 2016 came around and these clown sightings happened, and then I had all this back research of the Nephilim would have looked like some hybrid mix between lizard creatures and humans, whatever that looks like, And it all kind of just clicked with the 2016 clown sightings, and I realized the clown is a symbol for something, and it seems demonic. And if demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, are they trying to? There's something here. I don't know what it is. People see jesters on DMT, and it all kind of came together, and I rolled with that point. Clowns and Nephilim. All right. Has anybody done anything about this concept before? And I looked into it, and no one has ever really made that connection. I think there was one channel called the Groxt one years ago. Someone brought it to my attention, and I remember watching him years ago. Like, we're talking like 2011 period here. And I think I remember people reminding me he drew clowns in Google Maps, and he said the streets have been laid out and there's clowns hidden in the streets everywhere out of the road marking. So I think that's as far as anyone's ever really gone with associating.
That's weird.
With a clown. It was weird, yeah. But at the time, that was a big channel, and
Mhm.
I think that's the closest someone's made a connection that, okay, the clown and the demon must have some connection in some way, or the clown means something symbolic because whoever built the streets has clearly put the clown into the streets everywhere. So there you go. But even then, I was always dubious about his drawings, and sometimes I thought he was stretching a little bit to make a clown out of them and other things other than just clowns. So I guess there was that. And then somebody had also made a video kind of mocking conspiracy theorists. So it was a mock conspiracy theorist documentary, a mockumentary, talking about the Nephilim concept. And he was having a laugh at our expense. He was making fun of us, anybody who believes in the Nephilim is a crazy conspiracy theorist type video. But he was like doing it in a History Channel style voice. And he was like, the Nephilim had white skin, red hair, and they were cannibalistic in nature. There's only one explanation. They were interdimensional killer clowns from outer space.
And he's right.
And then
He's
right. Exactly.
And so
finally somebody got it.
So he made this joke, and the video doesn't even reference clowns or anything in the title. It was really obscure. The chance of me finding this was very obscure, but I found it, and I was like, wait a minute. What did you just say? And I rolled with it from there myself, and I realized actually, here I am, 7 years later. What I've discovered is that not only is the clown from its very inception in the West literally representations of the demonic European and Indian demons specifically, but it was also fully designed by Freemasons from its very inception as well. And it is actually used as a symbol to represent the Nephilim specifically, as a tool to channel them as a costume. And the Nephilim did look like clowns. That's basically how I got
that's interesting, because I think that there's so many, like, obviously things in the culture, and I don't know, it's like from the earliest time I can remember, people saying I'm afraid of clowns, and it's almost like, has anyone ever said I like clowns? I mean, because like that's like there's way more people say that I'm kind of creeped out by clowns without noting any connection to the demonic, especially Nephilim, and just saying clowns kind of freak me out a little bit. They're just a little bit strange. And it's like, I think so. Like, as like I said, at first I thought it was a little provocative, but then I was just like, but like, why? Like, in the movies, clowns are presented as evil way more than they're presented as funny characters. They're almost always presented as dark and weird and sinister. And obviously you can say, you just look around just pop culture, it's just like, that's how they're represented. So, I mean, it makes more sense than you realize.
Yeah, well, coulrophobia, which is the fear of clowns, is actually, it's up there. It's surprisingly up there on the list of top 10 fears. And it's kind of like, it's so bizarre, isn't it? It's like, because you got spiders, you got snakes, you got heights, the big three, just generally people just have an aversion. Right. And you could argue, well, that's a predator response to snakes and spiders. If, I'm not promoting evolution here, but they would argue, we used to be hunted by these things, therefore we have an inbuilt fear of them because of the, we used to live in forests which had snakes and spiders killing us. But if you can go that far to explain that, if you want to go that way, but why clowns? Why would you be scared of a clown? And it's funny because every year or 2 years, you can search them up. There's been an article released every year or so by some newspaper somewhere to talk about the fear of clowns. They always bring it up every year. And they always say the same thing. It's kind of like they're trying to get people to believe why you're scared of clowns it's because of the uncanny valley. It's almost human, but not quite. And it scares people. Masks scare people because you can't read their emotion. And we naturally, as humans, need to read people's emotions. It's an evolutionary thing. So when we don't trust people who wear masks, so naturally it's a fear. But I'm starting to think that's kind of the cover story. I think it's more the predator response thing, like the other ones. Because if the clowns are a caricature of what the Nephilim would have looked like, because that's what it truly is. I'm not saying that. I think people really need to get this, because I've heard, some of my critics would say that, of course, the Nephilim did look like clowns. I don't mean they went around with big red wigs and big red bulbous honk noses with horns going honk honk on unicycles like that. That's a joke, parodied, caricatured image of what the Nephilim truly did look like, okay? The clown is meant to look silly to us today. That's how we're supposed to interpret it. It's a mirror, and I think the real fear comes from they used to hunt us. They used to eat us. We were prey to them. And it's just ingrained deeply into us, our collective psyche of humanity, to when you see something that looks like that, you run, or you stay still, you panic, you have a prey response to a predator like this. Giants, what you're supposed to do when you see a giant with a huge big red serpentine smiling grinning sharp-toothed mouth, giant glowing eyes staring down at you with this wild crazy blood red hair, what are you going to do? You're looking up at this enormous like 15-foot monster in front of you that clearly wants to eat you. It's kind of, I don't think you're going to forget that very quick. I think humanity has remembered. In terms of caricaturing things, this is what humans naturally do. We seem to have a way, we're artistic by nature. I think that's naturally what we do. And I think in Japan, I think the Oni is actually the most closest thing to a Nephilim that we can actually get in terms of a representation of what the Nephilim specifically would have been like. And the Oni demon with the wide smile, the buck teeth sticking up and down either way, the wild-eyed look to it, that's actually extremely similar to the masks worn of the dragon masks in China, and the Hindu Rakshasa demons as well. It's identical to them. It's also identical to the Greek Gorgon Medusa, which was a half-human, half-reptile hybrid, birthed out of a female monster hybrid and a sea god, so a fallen angel with a siren. And it says in the book of Enoch that the women who mated with the fallen angels became sirens. So it's the same story told over every continent. The Rakshasas were giant, man-eating giants that subjugated mankind and turned them and became the slave class, and they
were also
them
guards.
Kings. Every single
of them,
I think the Asuras were considered gods, and then the Rakshasas were the negative aspects. But I think it's just two sides of the same demonic coin, the good and the bad. That duality play is just a lie. I think they use that to control people. In fact, the good cop, bad cop dichotomy, I think is a bit of a demonic play. Good or bad cop demons are still demons at the end of the day. They're still an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. So it doesn't matter, But I think they played a lot of games with people during that antediluvian time to keep themselves in power. But the Asuras look identical to the Rakshasas. If you actually look at them, there's there's no difference to them. They just put the Asuras as guardians on their temples, and the Rakshasas are the demons they were supposed to be fighting against. But they look the same. They look like monstrous, big, wide, grinning, monstrous, like serpent human hybrids. And this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the Nephilim. And a lot of my work is an anthropological study of all of these cultures all around the earth, and I'm threading together the similar vein they all have when representing their version of a demon. And you realize they have the same traits, the same they have their own aesthetical way of artistically depicting it, their own cultural stylization, but they're all fundamentally describing and depicting through their caricatures the same creatures. And you'll find clownish features often repeat over and over again. Pale white skin, some kind of red nose motif or multicolored patterns all over the face, whether it be polka dots or triangles or something. Some kind of headdress, which makes the hair look red, whether it's feathers, red straw, or even a golden headdress full of jewels of some kind, giving that radiating halo effect. They usually have makeup on their face to make their eyes look much larger. And they often give themselves a big wide grin as well, whether that's in makeup or in masks or whatever they use to venerate or dress like. The clownish features appear, and the clothes are always colorful, psychedelic, with ribbons or rags or something, or some kind of bejeweled effect, a lot like a clown costume. You'll find people have been dressing like the demons for as long as oral traditions and rituals have existed, and it's because what they're doing is they're trying to channel the ancestor spirits, as they call them. So they consider them the builders of their ancient civilization. So they're not talking about grandma or granddad or your uncles when they say ancestors. They're talking about the
100%.
old ancient gods who created their civilization, who they still venerate, the Nephilim. The Nephilim put themselves...
exactly, because because I think we try to explain that to people too. It's like ghosts are real, but they're not the ghosts of your grandma.
No,
like the spirits that are here are unclean spirits. They're spirits of the Nephilim. And I was wondering I'd wondered if you have seen this before. So obviously you started doing this before, obviously most people talking about this, or, I don't know, as far as connections on YouTube and any of the people who are seeking the truth. But it was interesting. So I was going back down the rabbit hole, and somebody saying, hey, have you ever seen that show Supernatural? And it's like, gosh, it's probably like 20 seasons. I don't know how long it's been on the air. But I was watching an episode, and I think it was right around the time people were telling me to to connect with you. There is an episode came out in 2006, and it was called "Everyone Loves a Clown."
Yeah.
And literally in this show, they do expose a little bit of truth in there. I think they put it in there. They literally say this clown that people are seeing, it's obviously a murderous clown, is a Rakshasa or a Rakshasa. How do you say it?
Yep.
Have you seen that episode?
Well, funnily enough, I
knew you had to.
It's funny you mentioned this. So I started my series in 2016. I started with very little knowledge on clowns. I wasn't a clown guy. I've never cared about them, you know. And I've never watched Supernatural, so I never got this information from anything prior. But one of my recent episodes in my Nephilim Look Like Clown series is episode 42. So I'm quite deep into this, you know. I've been doing it for a long time. 42,
yeah, that's what I was saying.
And 42 episodes in, and I released this episode where I examine the Rakshasa demon of all the Hindu-inspired countries of the Austro-Asian area, you know, and that covers a lot of places: Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, going across to the Philippines, Bali, Papua New Guinea. You know, there's a lot of islands. There's a big archipelago, but they've all been influenced by the same ideology, Hinduism, and they all have their own depictions of a Rakshasa demon. So I did a whole episode on that and showing how, you know, if you look at the features of a Rakshasa demon, you'll realize that they're identical to the Greek depictions of their own versions of demons, or the wild man depictions up here, or Japan, the Oni, and China. And you'll find, you know, the commonality, the thread going across a lot of cultures. And after I made that episode, somebody said what you just said to me. Have you actually seen this episode of Supernatural?
It might have been you. It might have been me. I remember in the comments, because I was like, "Did you see that?" Because I literally just watched that, and I was like, well, I guess it was confirmation I need to have it on the show. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
So obviously it's like some people might say, like, as they say to me all the time, you're reaching, bro. And it's like, obviously they just straight up showed it in this show. Like, this is a clown. Actually, not. It's not really a clown. It looks like a clown. It's actually a Rakshasa. It's this Hindu demon.
Yeah, specifically. And that's the thing, because I weaved my theory into the history of the clown costume in the West, and where do we get it from, and what's it modeled after exactly. And you know, that's a whole huge long conversation in its own right, that history. But basically, to summarize that quickly and why this is relevant to the Rakshasa, there was a time in the 1800s where there was a big shake-up in the industry of theatre, and the British theatre specifically. And a son of a very prominent, famous Freemason called Charles Dibdin, his son, who is also called Charles Dibdin to complicate matters, but that's what they did then. So Charles Dibdin Sr., who was a famous Freemasonic songwriter, very famous for making music, okay, and writing plays, big rock star of the time. And what do you know, he was a part of the craft, the Freemason Brotherhood, you know. So I reckon his son was probably the same, to be honest, because in true nepotistic fashion, his son got to take over one of the prominent theatres of London at that time. So, you know, my dad's famous, you better let me run the theatre type of situation. And as soon as he got in there, he did a shake-up, and he changed the costume of a clown. Now, the costume of a clown hasn't changed in like 300 years since its inception in like the mid-1500s, okay? Yeah. It's always been a boring, white, plain, ragged servant garb. Just white, yeah. And there was no reason to change the costume of a clown that we could see. His argument was, I want to make my mark on the industry, so I'm going to change the look of the clown, you know. But then you look at what he changed it into, and it's the most monstrous-looking, psychedelic, freakish thing you've ever seen in your entire life. You know, and it's kind of like, how did you get from plain, boring, white servant garbs to this? Like, how did you? That's a leap, you know, by any standard. You know, and you look into it, and you realize, well, actually, Charles Dibdin Sr., his father, he had a brother called Thomas, who was a member of the East India Company, who was colonizing India, the British Navy at that time. And Charles Dibdin himself traveled back and forth to India a lot. He was even going to live there, but he decided to not. He changed his mind when the ship couldn't set sail because of bad weather, and he decided to stay in England. So they loved India. The Dibdins loved that country, and I reckon they took their inspiration from the demonic symbolism on the temples, specifically the Asuras and the Rakshasas off the Thai temples, and another one called a Kalasungsang Rakshasa demon, which means upside down demon, with the same face, you know. But I reckon they saw this iconography and brought it back to England and decided, I'm going to dress the clown like a Rakshasa demon. And you can actually find examples where they've done drawings of Joseph Grimaldi, the actor of the day who donned the first costume, in this upside down position with it on his hands, with his legs in the air, with his head bent up facing you. And that's identical to how the Rakshasa Kala Sungsang is depicted in Bali. It's identical, you know, and it's kind of, you clearly see where they got their inspiration from. They have just modeled the entire costume and makeup after a demon in India. Specifically, like, bang on, that's where they got it from. There's not a shadow of a doubt. You can see it clear as day once you put the two next to each other. Yeah, that's what, but no history book mentions that anywhere. They've just glossed over that fact. They don't bring it up. They don't talk about it. What you'll find is a lot of talk about how smart Joseph Grimaldi was, the actor who created the first costume of a clown. He had nothing to do with it. He was a Freemason.
Right.
You know?
Let me ask you a question. So as you were saying, when you were doing, experimenting with drugs and you were seeing like these jester type characters, I remember before I ever, started doing it, going down the rabbit hole, I was listening to Joe Rogan. He had guys like Graham Hancock on, and they were talking about DMT.
Yeah.
And they were specifically talking about going down there, doing ayahuasca in the Amazon, working with shaman, and all these people experiencing these obviously these trips where they're seeing entities. Joe Rogan talks about smoking DMT, seeing jesters. And is there any kind of equivalent? Yeah, what's interesting is so ayahuasca is the vine of the dead. Okay, so you're going in with this medicine man. It's like, okay, so obviously they're attempting to contact ancestors. And then they just so happen to start seeing like serpent type beings,
it's like Medusa looking
jesters, clowns,
snakes all over there coming out of their head and everything.
Yeah. Is it possible that the Diptons, when they were in India, right, you think about like the Beatles going over to the Far East and coming back with all this kind of like hippy dippy stuff, the yoga, and then all the stuff that's inspired like the 60s. Is there a DMT equivalent like that, or I mean like whatever they use over in India to have their, the religious ceremonies when they probably venerate the Rakshasa and all the weird stuff they do?
They primarily wear costumes to be specifically possessed by demons. That's how they open their channels. They do rituals where they dress like the demons, like the ancestors. And this is the point. Like, you don't need drugs to be possessed by a demon. All you need to do is dress like one.
That's true.
That's the secret. That's the secret they don't want anyone to know, in fact. That's the secret that gets used by all the music industry, in fact. If you dress like a psychedelic clown monster and white up your skin and red up your lips, you will be elevated through the industry. You will be. If not by the demon within you giving you skills you don't prior have, the people who run the industry will notice you and put you on a pedestal for others to emulate and copy. Because the more people they can get dressing that way, the more channels they open.
Is that a Lady Gaga situation where she's, like when Lady Gaga first hits the scene, besides the fact that she likely stole some other pop star's identity, that was what she was known for at the beginning, was that she was dressing up in the most outlandish stuff. And it's interesting how like you have like the Doja Cats wearing all the gems and they like dressing these people in like the most ridiculous ways. You think models and stuff, like runway models, it's like, what, like obviously they do stuff that no one would actually wear. Is it has something to do with that?
It's the same thing. It's the same practice all these ancestor spirit cultures do. In India, for example, you have something called the Theyyam. Now, the Theyyam is a very old practice. It's probably predates Hinduism itself, actually. And they still do it in this one specific region of India. And they basically have one person of the village who's the shaman. They don't call him a shaman, but that's their version of a shaman by any standards. And he would basically dress in this orange-skinned black makeup with serpentine black slit makeup eyes, adorn him in like a demon mask with like fangs and everything. He had this huge aura around him. He wears this very elaborate dress. And even when he does this, he has to go through a ritual while being painted by specific people. It's all very ritualized and ceremonial, from start to finish. Then he comes out to the public, and then the people have to give him offerings like chickens, live chickens. And if they do, he has to eat it. He has to bite the head off the chicken because he is the embodiment of the demon. They are feeding the demon who now has embodied this particular god, this person who is dressed like the god. And then he channels the demon and they ask it questions like, how can I solve this family conflict? What do I need to do to solve this financial issue? And that's what the ritual's for, to gain insight and power and knowledge from the channel, the individual dressed like the demon who is now channeling it. And you can look into it. That's called the Theum in India. And there's another one very similar just across the way, which has a slightly different name and a slightly different aesthetic, but they do the same thing. They dress that way and they get possessed.
It's called the Fame.
That's the
like
trick.
Fame, like famous people, like the Fame.
No, THEYYUM. So they them.
That's even more. That's even more fascinating and funny because, oh my gosh, I have so much to say about that. I wanted to mention something to you actually, because I find this very very interesting when it comes to acting. You know, in Cambodia, there's a word for magic. It's sel. Okay, and I don't know if you know that the word for magic, and that refers to like witchcraft and occultism. And then selaba is in Cambodian, it's their same word for sale is their word for art and dance and acting. It's the same root word for art, dance, and acting is derived from magic. They call it magic. And so they literally will call dance, and because they know that those moves where they move their hands and they do those dancing, and that's where the things that look similar to the Rakshasa, like the giants that were in Cambodia as well. And they're giant clowns. That's literally what they are. And like they embody these things with their dance, and they're doing what they call magic. It's the embodiment of the acting of that takes on that persona. And I think it's very fascinating because I was just in LA, and I went by a place that I used to, before I was like a Christian, I'd gone there a lot, and it was like this improv studio, and I just went by to check it out and be like, see what it's like over there, just kind of see around. And I was with a friend, and when we went there, they were doing a class, and the class was called Clown. It's a new type of improv called Clown that is going on all over the place right now, apparently. And what it is, and I watched this and I watched the whole thing because I was kind of in shock a little bit when I walked into this, and I'm like, what's going on? Oh, it's Clown. And I'm like, Clown? I was like, this is strange. And so I watched they're doing their improv, and literally it's like a improv group, but it's almost like embodying. They constantly talk about embodying the identity of the silliness or whatever, or try to feel the entity coming into you, the clown coming into you. And I'm like listening to this woman saying, like, giving instructions to all these group of people, and I'm just like kind of shockingly watching this, like people being possessed. And I'm like thinking that because I cast demons out, bro. I like pray demons off of people, and so like this is like what I do. And so when I'm seeing this, I'm just like, these people are getting possessed right in front of my face. I'm like watching them do this ritual, and I'm like, this is shocking. And people think that this is funny and normal, and they're like laughing. And towards the end of the thing, they're doing like this improv acting, and someone walks in with a baby, bro. Someone walks in with a baby, and the people on the stage that are doing their improv go, baby, baby. And the other one goes, eat, baby. And they start acting out eating a baby. Like, I'm not even joking. I'm watching this, like, and everybody's laughing in the audience, and I'm like, you guys have no freaking clue what you guys are laughing at. Like, you guys think that's funny? Like, you have no clue that the people on stage are literally channeling a demon, and it's mocking you about how it wants to eat your children. It was.
Is that possibly like that Kundalini spirit that they always talk about? Because even people like the counterfeit gifts of the Holy Spirit. You go into these crazy churches, and people are getting slain in the spirit, and they're laughing like ridiculously. Like, obviously, you know, the Holy Spirit's not a spirit of confusion or nonsense. And like they're just writhing around the garden, like laughing at stuff. Is that because obviously you think of like the Hindu stuff, the Kundalini spirit?
Dude,
is that
I can totally give you an experience on that one because I do this. I don't know if you've ever dealt with casting out demons and stuff, but I'm sure this will be interesting. But like when I go to pray for people and we cast out demons, there is a very common thing that happens. The people will laugh. Certain people with certain demons, I'll be praying and they'll be like, and I'm like, whoa! Like the first time it started happening to me, I was like, they're like, I'm so sorry, I don't know why I did that. And I'll just be like, all right, in the name of Jesus, whatever's holding them down, I'd be like, come out now. And they'll be like, and they'll like wicked laugh. And you're like, what the heck is this? And then there's some churches that will, like, I've gone where there's people that are like laughing when the Spirit of God's moving. They're laughing. And I was like, at first kind of thrown off. I was like, dude, this is really weird. Like, why are these people laughing? You know, and I recognized that it was demonic laughter. And it was almost like the demon was like laughing that they weren't getting caught or found out, that they were in the presence of the Holy Spirit, and they weren't being cast out. And the demon was like mocking everyone in the crowd, like laughing through the person. And they're like, oh, it's holy laughter. There is holy laughter. Actually, there is some situations where it is holy laughter, but most of the time it's demonic laughter. I've noticed, like, most of the time, and people don't catch it. They can't even tell the difference. But there's a significant difference between laughing with joy and laughing maniacal. And you can see that reflected. You can see it reflected so clearly in people, because like you see like the Joker and all these other people in their acting, in like they do that laughter thing, like the evil bad guys always do that laughing like when they win or something. Dude, I've seen that in real life several times. In real life, okay, I'll be like praying for somebody and they're like, I don't know why I did that, and they're embarrassed. They're like, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm laughing right now at you. And I'm like, it's not you, it's fine. There's something in you that's laughing. And the minute they recognize when I say that, they go, oh my gosh, you're right. And it's like the light bulb clicks on. They're like, I legit have a demon. It literally just laughed through my mouth and I couldn't even control it. And they're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And then once the light bulb goes on, I can cast the thing out so much easier, because I'm like, don't worry about it. It's not you. There's something in you that's mocking me. And a lot of times the demons will laugh at us.
Don't worry.
Oh my God, literally. But it's comical. And in fact, there's an instance I prayed for a dude that I was in a church that didn't believe like fully in casting out demons and stuff, and there was this guy sitting behind me, and he was like totally demonized, and it was like clear that he had some mental issues. He's like sitting there drawing on a piece of paper furiously, and like the Spirit of the Lord is just like, hey, go talk to that guy. And I just go up and I sit down, and like it was towards the end of the worship thing and whatever, and I just walk over and I go, hey man, I'm like, what's up, dude? And he's like, nothing. And I'm like, what are you drawing? And he's drawing eyes. He's drawing eyeballs all over. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, of course you're drawing eyes. I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. What are you drawing eyes for? And he's just like, oh, I just draw stuff. And I'm like, the eyes embody like, the seraphim angel. And, Satan was called a cherub. And he also was described as being covered in eyes. And I started explaining some stuff to him, and he's just like, huh. And then like the demon starts like kind of manifesting in him, and he's like growling at me all of a sudden, and he goes back to normal, and he's like trying to pretend to be normal. And then I'm like sitting there talking with this guy. I'm like, hey, so I was like, do you hear the voices? I just straight up asked the dude, do you hear the voices? And he's like, I believe we all do. And I'm like, no, not everybody hears voices, bro. I'm like, that's not a normal response. And then like he was like, yeah, well I hear him, and they talk to me, blah blah blah. And he starts telling me about his experience of, he's like literally straight up being demonized, and he's in the middle of a church and nobody knows and nobody even cares. And I'm like talking with the guy, and I'm like, and I hear the Spirit of the Lord goes, he has the spirit of Joker. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, that's weird. And so then I'm like, all right. And I'm like, hey, so I'm just gonna tell you something. I think you have something demonic attached to you, bro. I was like, to be completely honest, I'm just going to share this with you. And, if you want some help, I can pray for you. And he goes, yeah, I think I might too. I think I might have something attached to me too. And then I go, you want to know its name? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, it's saying its name is Joker. And the guy's face just goes like completely blank. And he's like, I collect Joker. And he's like, my whole room is covered in Joker. He's like, I have statues of Joker. He's like, I have posters of Joker. He says his whole room, he's collected action figures of Joker. And dude, nuts experience thing. Cause I didn't know this guy. I just walked up to him and I'm like, I think the names of the demon's Joker. And like, he's just like, what the heck? And it like dawned on him. But anyways, I ended up praying for the dude, and there was some cool stuff that happened, and it was God totally moved. But it was fascinating to see that Joker demonic representation totally embodied itself in this guy as the Joker. And I was like, so weird.
Yeah. So Paul, I wanted to ask you, actually, that's a good direction I wanted to go with. So the whole Joker connection in the movies now, had you ever heard, obviously a lot of people had seen all the Batman movies. You had, like Jack Nicholson played him in '89, and then you had, Heath Ledger. one of the most famous Joker experiences. I remember hearing this at the time, and of course, without any kind of spiritual understanding, I didn't understand this at all. Like Jack Nicholson claimed after Heath Ledger passed, he warned him about playing the Joker, and it was like that. Like if you go look that up, that's all he said. He didn't elaborate on what he meant. What do you think he meant by that? I mean, obviously, I have my theories, but like that's very cryptic. That he makes sense. That draws into the acting stuff. This guy putting on the paint and becoming this maniacal character. Is that what he was warning about?
Well, yeah. Like I said, to dress like a clown is not a trivial thing, and that's the point. It's been made to be a trivial thing in our society in the West, but that's not at all how it's seen anywhere else in the world where they practice these rituals called ancestor spirit worship. They know why they're dressing like a clown. They're dressing to be possessed by the demons for power. Mm. They tell you that's why they're doing it. It's not even a secret. Mm-hmm. In the highly Christianized Western Hemisphere, it's harder for the demons to be so brash and open about their tactics and possession. And we in the West have been manipulated to believe that spirits are people, that you can communicate with through our occult means. Mm-hmm. If a demon was to manifest into a person openly, and we knew that, well, they run the risk of being cast out by somebody who has the Holy Spirit, because we're a heavily Christianized geographical location on the earth. Okay, so the demons can't be so out in the open about it as they are in these other ancestor spirit worship sects in other places around the earth. So they have to do it in a covert manner. And again, the costume of a clown was created by people who work intimately with demons through these secret societies. It's their version of the ancestor spirit costume used to channel specifically the Nephilim spirits. So when you have a character like the Joker in the media, which every year there's always some new Joker angle that gets created. Mm-hmm. A new film comes out. I think part 2 is about to come out, is it not?
I think so, yeah.
Character popularized over and over and over again every year. They're always repopularizing the Joker character. And then you get people dressing like it for Halloween, don't you? And then you get people idolizing the character as well, seeing it as a symbol of something fun. Why so serious? That's exactly what the DMT jesters say to people in that other realm. Don't take life too seriously, that kind of idea. Well, they're getting people to dress like it every year, pretty much for Halloween, which is Samhain, a Celtic holiday, and you understand they understood Samhain to be the time when the veil between the spirit realm and the physical realm is at its thinnest, when they're kind of just touching, and you can easily get in touch with the spirits during this time. So what they've managed to do is get people to dress like a Nephilim spirit just in time for when the veil is the thinnest, so the channels are more readily available, and they do it through the media, popularizing the costume of a clown. And you'll find it today, dressing like a clown is actually, as of 2023 and 24, high-end fashion. The fashion runways have gone with the clown aesthetic for these past 2 years, and they tried to do it in late 2022, but it was laughed off the runway, and people saying, "No, we can't do this." Then the next year they did it again for their fall collection, and now people are applauding it, saying it's stunning and brave to dress like a clown, and
stunning and brave.
Yeah, and the clown aesthetic is going to be in. It's vogue. It's what everyone's going to start doing.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously you see these runway. You can look this up right now. I'm not even joking. All fashion outlets are talking about the clown aesthetic being the it thing. But what you see on the runways are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous costumes. But that'll trickle down to the outlets eventually in a more watered down version, the clothes they sell to us to wear, And don't be surprised if you start seeing the clown aesthetic becoming more and more popular. On TikTok, there's a huge underground subculture that got very popular in the past 3 years, which is called clowncore. And it's about people dressing like clowns as a serious fashion choice to go out in the public on a regular basis, and it's growing in popularity, especially among Gen Z. Surprisingly enough, the younger generations, they have pushed this on us for a long time. They're getting more and more people to dress this way, and they do it through people like the Joker. And you'll always, my last video actually in the series was about just the last 10 years of clown propaganda through the media. And why they're doing it, and how they're getting people. How they're getting people to dress that way. They are pushing it hard now, really hard. Like they want you dressing like a clown because they want to create more channels, and that being ignorance of the law of the spiritual realm is not going to make you immune to the law. They know why they dress like clowns in these ancestor spirit worship cultures, to be possessed. Just because we don't know that's what it doesn't mean we're not going to get possessed. Okay, that's how it works.
Right.
And again, if you fill your room with iconography, idols dedicated to the Joker character, that's just opening up more channels. You're just asking for this thing to come into you and use you if you haven't got the Holy Spirit, something else is going to go in there, And this is the thing, they call it the spirit of Joker. All Nephilim spirits are the spirit of Joker. Did you know there's very actually little distinction? That's kind of how they.
Well, it's like isn't that kind of like that trickster, that kind of trickster spirit? Is that kind of what that's?
Yeah, and well, they all look like clowns. They all have that aesthetic about them, even in the spirit realm, And so to dress as a clown, I'm sure maybe there are slight differences in how the Nephilim looks, just how every snake is unique in color and design, but they're all snakes fundamentally. And if you dress in a specific way, you're inviting any of them in, really. It doesn't matter which clown you dress like. It's a channel it's an invitation to all the Nephilim, because that's what it is. If you mirror something in the spiritual, you create a portal, you create a channel, you create a connection, and that's what they're getting people to do.
That's interesting what you're saying, and I was just thinking about that, like if you guys were familiar with Heath Ledger before he played the Joker, it was like, he was a good actor. I think he was likable. But everybody said when he played the Joker, it was like you didn't even see Heath Ledger up there anymore. I was just kind of just thinking about that, like, was that wasn't him?
No,
likely playing that, because he played the Joker so much different than anybody else did, and he really was very convincing the way he played it. And it's like, oh, I got the chills just thinking about that. Like that's what we saw up there was not Heath Ledger.
Demon acting through him.
Putting on a mask is serious. And that's what actors do. All the original actors in theatre wore masks for this reason, and you see it yourself. And you were talking about it there, people were doing the clown act, embodying the spirit of comedy and humor or something like that, whatever. I've seen a video in the past where people put on the mask and they start going nuts. They start talking in tongues and making silly noises, and you can see these videos of people look like they're being possessed just as soon as they put a mask on. And I think it's extremely serious. I think we do not understand the power of masks. Like there's even a film called The Mask, played by Jim Carrey, one of the biggest Joker-like characters to ever exist. And once he goes on it possesses him. It takes over with the spirit of a Joker-like character of some sorts. It's supposed to be Loki, isn't it, of the Norse mythology, but. They're telling you in media what the role of masks really are used for and how they are still used today. And what is acting but somebody putting on a persona, someone changing their ego,
the symbol of the acting is like the one face is kind of like the one mask that's like kind of smiling and the other one's kind of frowning. Mm-hmm. It's like that's kind of symbolic of the whole art, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's modeled after Dionysus, who is the patron saint of theatre, the Greek god of wine, debauchery, parties, and theatre and acting. And Dionysus is basically a fallen angel. He was considered in the Greek pantheon an outsider god from Thracian culture, but he roamed Europe with his band of merry men, fauns and maenads, with a big party, and basically new people joined his band wherever he went and got put under his spell. And there's a strange part of that story where anybody who's around him for long enough will turn into a faun, will become a hybrid human, will become a half human, half animal hybrid. Wow. So that's really strange, because you consider that the fallen angel were mixing of kinds and flesh during that time, and hybridizing humans after the Nephilim, when you couldn't mate with women anymore to create monsters, let's just mess with the DNA instead, and that was going on as well. So even in that Greek myth, you have this patron saint of theatre, and the mask is actually modeled after first his face, the Green Man face as well. It's the same person, and the smile actually isn't a smile; it's a heart shape. And this is where we get the symbol of a heart from as well. I did some research into this. The typical heart symbol. It has nothing to do with our heart, because our heart isn't shaped.
Yeah, because because it's not anatomically correct.
No, it's actually modeled after the ivy. It's the ivy leaf. Yeah, and the mouth of the mask was the ivy leaf, which looked like a big grin when you see the heart there. This big, pointed, powerful laughter face. But it's named after the ivy leaf, which was the flower of Dionysus, like the leaf of Dionysus. So that's where we get that mask from. And then if you flip the ivy leaf and put the heart upside down, it looks like it's crying, or then it's smiling, and then it kind of all got mashed together. So that's where we get it from, and it goes deep. Okay, I'm just touching over some things. I mean,
well, isn't Dionysus? I remember looking this up one time. I think we were researching Halloween, and so I think the Greeks celebrated Dionysus in some kind of festival to him around October 31st.
Yeah,
and they dressed up.
Yeah,
so it's like maybe that idea of like dressing in the character of the spirits of Dionysus.
Well. What happened in Europe, inspired by this Thracian cult, you'll find that region of Bulgaria, Romania now, that kind of area, the Eastern European region where that originally comes from, that ancient culture of Dionysus. They still do that practice. It's called the wild man tradition. And you'll find all of Europe does it, actually. Every country of Europe has an ancient wild man tradition. This is the Europeans' version of the ancestor spirit worship culture from like India or Australia or South America or North America, or these are the places. This is Europeans' version of it. It's called the Wild Man. And it's modeled after Dionysus and his band of demons, shall we call it. Well, there's all these myths and stories of giants with clubs covered in hair and weird psychedelic colors and horrible beasts roaming around with a club over the shoulder with the demons following them everywhere. So it's kind of modeled after this Dionysian story as well. And you'll find every year around this time, this winter solstice period, just before fasting and before, like, it kind of got Catholicized into the period before Lent. They would have this festival now, but its sources are this Thracian understanding, like you just explained. And they would have this wild party of excess and drinking where they all dress like demons, like wild beast, horned, big, grinning, fanged demon monsters, and every country in Europe has their own version of this. And that's they are dressing like demons to channel them, to then have a big party in excess and sin, basically, but then they fast after that. Like it was okay. It doesn't matter that we did all these horrible things.
I mean, that's like, as you brought up the Illuminati earlier, that makes you think of like Eyes Wide Shut and like the wild, like Rothschild parties where they're wearing like wicked masks, like long noses and just deformed looking faces and stuff like that, all wearing their cloaks and their.
It's interesting when you wear a mask, the embodiment that comes along with it. I don't know if you guys ever done this stuff, but like if you like I put on masks before I was Christian, I would like just play around and put on masks for fun and like do silly stuff, and we would like hang out. I had these big blow up dinosaur costumes that we would put in the dinosaur costumes and like walk around and terrorize the town. We were just being goofy, me and my friends. And so like, but like when you put on a mask and you put on something that covers your face, it's very, very easy for you to embody a totally different character. Like I have friends that when they are like totally like reserved, but once they put the mask on, it's like boom, they become a totally different person. They become the character of whatever they want it to be. And it's like, it's fascinating, like all these kids that are doing these furry things. You see this furry trend where they put on these big animal, and it's so disturbing. Yeah, it's so disturbing. But like when they're doing it because they're socially awkward, but when they put the mask on and embody this furry, which happens to be, by the way, there's a demon named Furfur, heads up. Okay, if the people don't know that furries are derived from the demon Furfur, look it up. It's interesting. But you put on this mask and they become a totally different character. They're more outgoing, they're more friendly, they're more everything, because all the anxiety leaves, because all the demons left you, because you're embodying a bigger demon. And they're like, hey, cool, yeah, come into this. And they want you in these costumes. They want people dressed up all the time. They want people dressed up like furries. They want people dressed up like clowns. They want people embodying this, because you can get into a character. And it's like, once you get into that character, it's so much easier to channel spirit. This is how you channel demons, guys. People are like, oh, I don't have a demon, bro. Like, you don't even know what it is to channel a demon. Like, but it's so simple to channel demonic entities. It's when you begin to embody other personalities, anything other than the image of Christ that we're supposed to conform to, you're potentially channeling demons.